This happened when I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. I was hanging out with a couple of friends before school started. We were just standing around talking about dumb stuff that 15-year-olds do. Soon, the warning bell rang and we had to go our separate ways to attend our classes. I took my time heading to my class because my teacher, Coach Thompson, was pretty laid back and didn't mind if I was a bit late. He usually started class a few minutes late anyways because he was also a sports coach and was always busy with that stuff. As I made my way to class, the school bell rang again. School was now starting and I would be late, but I didn't think much of it and kept walking. The hallways were now empty. The intercom came back on and there was an announcement that the school was going under a lockdown. I couldn't understand why. I was pretty confused. Everything seemed fine to me. I kept walking towards my classroom, thinking it might be a false alarm or a drill. When I entered the hallway where my classroom was located, I stopped and froze. At the far end of the hallway, there was a large man wearing a ski mask and all black. He also had combat boots on and a huge black duffel bag around his shoulder. It took me a few seconds to process what was happening. The man in the ski mask hadn't noticed me yet, but then he turned his head and looked in my direction. I quickly ducked back around the corner, scared out of my mind. He had been standing right where my classroom was, so I couldn't go there now. The hallways were completely empty, and I started to panic. I knew the school pretty well, as I'd been there plenty of times prior to my sophomore year, so I went to the nearest place I knew, which was a nearby bathroom. I was hoping to stay safe in there until everything was over. I sat in a bathroom stall, trying to listen for any sounds, praying that the man wouldn't come inside. During the time in there, I was terrified, and I didn't dare make a noise. I stayed in the bathroom, trying to calm myself down from hyperventilating. For maybe around 30 minutes, I was in there. It was completely quiet, and I couldn't hear much. But at one point, I did hear footsteps, and it really freaked me out. I really don't know who it was, but luckily, they moved past where I was, and then things went back to being silent. I just hoped whoever that guy I had seen was would not enter the bathroom. Finally, I decided that I would leave. I hadn't heard anything in the longest time. I thought it might be safer to get out of there, and I stepped out. When I did, I noticed the hallways were still empty and quiet. The lockdown was still in effect, and I had no idea what was happening. I cautiously started speed walking back towards my classroom, and I was very careful, looking all around. I had made it about halfway back when I suddenly heard a noise that made me freeze. It was the sound of footsteps getting closer from the next hallway around the corner. It was happening all over again. I could feel the sinking feeling of the fear and the shock once more. I quickly turned around and went back down another hallway, trying to avoid whoever was coming my way. I glanced back for a split second and saw the man in the ski mask starting to come around the corner. In this point in time, I swear I could have ran a 4.3 flat in the 40-yard dash. For once in my life, I was genuinely running for my life, and nothing else mattered besides that. It was a weird feeling. I didn't care about anything, not girls I had crushes on, not my homework, not even my job. All I cared about was staying alive for myself. I kept on running. Eventually, I stopped, unable to hear the man behind me anymore. I gathered myself and started walking towards the exit, hoping to find a way out. When I reached the exit, relief flooded over me as I saw multiple police officers outside of the school. I ran for the door, and when they saw me, they waved me over. I was able to leave and breathe a sigh of relief. The man inside the school was later caught, but we never found out what his intentions were. The memory of that day haunted me, and my parents ended up putting me in therapy to help me out. No 15-year-old or anybody should have to experience anything like that. It's been about 7 years now, and I'm way better. We returned to our normal routines at school shortly after, and our school had a 24-hour cop for the next year. That made everyone feel a lot safer. I'm happy nobody got hurt and I was able to make it out alive. I wouldn't wish that experience upon my worst enemy. So this is a story about when I was 18 years old, and I had a personal encounter with a man who caused a lockdown at my school. It all started during the 4th hour of the school day. I was sitting in class, barely awake, when suddenly a noise came over the intercom. The principal said, "Attention students and staff, this is a code red lockdown. Please follow lockdown procedures immediately." My heart sank, as I would assume everyone else's did when hearing this. Our teacher then started telling us where to go. We all had to huddle up in the corner of the room. She then closed and locked the classroom doors and turned out the lights. At this point, everybody started whispering, wondering what exactly was going on. Obviously, we all wanted to know why we were under a lockdown. One of the kids in the class asked the teacher, but she wouldn't tell us. She only told us to stay quiet. The minutes turned into hours, which was awful, because locking a bunch of high school kids in a room without being able to move isn't such a good idea. Many students went on their phones, and others whispered and talked to each other. The classroom became a huge mix of confusion and anxiety. But as the hours dragged on, we sat there, and every noise we heard or thought we heard outside of the room scared us, but we didn't hear much. At this point, we were all convinced that there really was somebody out there with a weapon. Some students speculated about a potential intruder or an active threat, while others whispered about rumors they had heard. At one point, one of the kids in the class got up and couldn't resist looking out the classroom window. The teacher made him sit back down pretty much right away, but he claimed he saw a guy in a red sweatshirt walking down the hallway. I wasn't sure whether to believe him or not. Hours of waiting went by, and soon we reached just about the end of the school day. Then, finally, the long-awaited announcement came over the intercom. The lockdown has been lifted. Please remain calm and proceed with caution. Everybody was so happy to be able to leave, and the classroom doors swung open. We all cautiously stepped back into the hallways. But the story didn't end there for me. Back then, I rode the bus to and from school, and I boarded it along with the other kids. As I rode the bus home, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The whole day just felt weird and off, and it made me more aware of the things around me for the rest of the day. When I got off the bus, I noticed that a ways back, a car was parking on the side of the street outside of my house, and I only lived with my parents, who were both at work at the time. The car wasn't like right in front of my house, but a little ways down. We also lived in a little more rural area, so the yards were bigger and there was a little more space. This also meant that we got less traffic through the neighborhood though. After getting off the bus, I quickly walked inside, hoping that the car would just drive away. When I got inside my house though, I checked out the window and the car was still there. I could see that somebody was inside of it, and it just gave me a bad feeling. I didn't want to take any chances. I called my parents, casually asking when they would be home, hiding the anxiety in my voice. They mentioned that they would be a couple of hours, which did not help my situation. I did not tell them about the car on the side of the street, because I didn't want them to worry, and I hoped that the car would drive away soon. Alone in the house, I hid by the window, peeking through the curtains. The car outside wouldn't leave, and it freaked me out. Trying to distract myself, I turned on the TV and put on a sitcom, but my eyes kept darting back to the creepy car outside. It just wouldn't leave. I decided that I wasn't going to look outside anymore. It wasn't doing me any good. Maybe 10 minutes passed, and I was just watching the TV. But then I heard a door closing outside. It was a car door. I quickly looked back out the window again, and this time saw a man getting out of the vehicle. He was wearing a red sweatshirt. I watched him start to walk up, right into our front yard. I ducked down and then ran away, sprinting for my bedroom. I got inside, closed my door, and hid under my bed like a little kid. I was terrified. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to do. A few moments went by, and then I heard another sound. It was a knocking at my bedroom window. That just about made me jump up. Immediately, I took out my phone and dialed 911. Whoever was there was definitely up to no good. I told the operator exactly what was going on, and I was told that the police would be there shortly. In the meantime, I wasn't hearing any noises, and the man had knocked on my window just the one time. I was still scared as could be, though. A few more minutes passed, and I remained hidden under my bed. I had hoped that the man had gone away, but just as I was thinking that that may have been a possibility, there was a sound of glass breaking coming from the other end of the house in the back. The guy had broken in. I heard some more noise from that direction, and soon it sounded like somebody was inside. Then I heard another noise. It was police sirens. This was the best sound that I had heard all day. I heard the man inside the house turning around and leaving through the back the way that he had came. Less than a minute later, the police were there. Long story short, they actually caught the guy running away in the neighbor's backyard. The same man was also in fact the cause of the lockdown at my school earlier. Apparently, he had somehow gotten inside the school, probably before it started for the day. Somebody spotted him inside and the school went under a lockdown. I don't know how, but he was able to evade everybody and then leave the school without getting caught, likely escaping out of an open window. I still can't believe how he went to my house of all places afterwards. It makes me think that possibly the guy was stalking me. Either way, I'm glad I don't have to worry about it anymore. Alright, So picture this. I'm called in as a substitute teacher for a class that missed out on a field trip. The regular teacher and most of the students were out on the field trip, while I was left in charge of 4 students who didn't have their parent permission slips signed. To set the scene, I had just finished subbing for another class. Afterwards, I was asked to sub for this class, and the instructions were pretty straightforward. Play a Mythbusters video for the students, and hand out worksheets to keep them occupied. Sounds easy, right? Well, here's where things took an unexpected turn. Barely a few minutes into class with the video playing, the Fab Four, who seemed to be inseparable buddies, all raised their hands and requested to go to the bathroom. Now, being the laid-back sub that I am, I granted their wish, with a friendly reminder to return soon so we could finish the video together. They nodded eagerly, promising to be back in a jiffy, and headed out to the hallway as I paused the video. As I waited for them to return, a couple of minutes went by. Then, I heard a noise come over the intercom. There was an announcement that the school was now going in a lockdown, and this was not a drill. This put me in a little bit of an odd situation. Panic started to settle in as I realized that these 4 kids were nowhere to be seen. Should I go out and search for them? Or should I stick to the lockdown protocols and secure the classroom by locking the doors and turning off the lights? I figured my students should be back any second, and I stood there in my classroom doorway for about another minute or so. In a moment of concern for their well-being, I chose to go find them. I figured they must be hanging out in the nearest bathroom, right? Easy to find, or so I thought. I hurriedly made my way to the hallway, fueled by a mix of worry and determination. I walked to the bathroom as quickly as I could, and I got winded because I'm severely not in shape like I used to be, and I pushed open the bathroom door and knocked. I was hoping to find them and usher them back to the classroom. "Hey guys, we're on lockdown. You need to come back to the classroom," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty bathroom. But to my surprise, there was no response, not a peep. As confusion grew, I cautiously pushed the bathroom door open wider, half expecting them to jump out. But that wasn't the case. The bathroom was empty. Not a single person in sight. My heart sank. Where on earth did these students go? I couldn't dwell on it for long, though, because my priority was to get back to my classroom. If the students had wandered off, then that was their fault. They would likely be found by another faculty member. With a mix of anxiety and haste, I retraced my steps, making my way back to the classroom that I was in charge of. I went inside and remained by the door. 10 long minutes went by, which felt like a whole hour, and still there was no sign of my students. Just when I was about to lose my cool from all the suspense, I heard this weird noise coming from inside the classroom. I quickly scanned the room, hoping to figure out where it was coming from, but there was nothing there, just an empty and super quiet classroom. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then I heard it again. This time, my eyes locked onto this person crouched behind a desk at the back of the room. I cautiously approached, my voice trembling when I asked, "Who's there?" I was praying it was just a student playing an elaborate prank, but to my dismay, the figure that rose up from beyond the desk was no student. It was a man, a complete stranger, and certainly not a student. I freaked out and sprinted out of the classroom immediately, desperate to find help. Now, as a grown adult, you're probably wondering why I bolted and didn't stay in the room and fight him. Well, like I said, I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm not in shape, so the odds of me winning a fight protecting myself are like 4 out of 10. I pounded on the door of the nearest classroom, and thankfully, the teacher opened the door. Their expression quickly turned to concern as they listened to my explanation of what had happened. Without wasting a second, they dialed the school principal and alerted her about the new situation. Soon enough, the school became filled with activity as police officers were everywhere in the hallways. It turned out that the stranger I had encountered was the very person the school had been locked down for. He must have snuck into my classroom when I was down the hall looking for my students. This realization made my mind go black as I thought about all the possibilities that could have happened if I didn't run away from my classroom. It turned out that the missing students had taken refuge in another teacher's classroom. Nobody had thought to inform me, though. Rumors began to circulate that this intruder had ulterior motives, with whispers of him searching for someone specific or possibly carrying a weapon. The details remained vague, and the school kept the information tightly under wraps. Looking back on that day, I'm just grateful that everybody was okay. After that crazy incident, I needed some serious time off. When I finally went back to teaching, I had a whole new perspective. I will certainly never forget that day. This happened back in my freshman year of high school. It was an average school day, just like any other for the most part. I remember I was sitting in my history class, which I think was the third period of the day. That's when somebody came to the door of the classroom with a note. I remember back at my high school, a couple of students would work for the office each hour and deliver passes to the students. The passes would usually be for the students to leave school for things like dentist appointments or whatever. When the student got to our class, she handed the note to my teacher, Mr. Watterson. He read the note and then called my name. I was really surprised, because I wasn't aware of having any reason to leave the school that day. I thought maybe I forgot about a dentist appointment or something, but my mother hadn't mentioned anything, and I know she would have. When my name was called, I looked around and then got up and slowly walked to my teacher. He said something like, "See you later, pal, here's the homework." Then, he grabbed the assignment from his desk and handed it to me. I took the note, which also served as a hall pass, and left the classroom. I remember that's when I read the pass for the first time. The note said something like, "I will be here to pick you up for your appointment at 10:30. Mom." I guess I had an appointment of some sort. It just seemed a little bit strange to me. Still, I guess I was happy to be leaving school. I walked through the empty hallways, making my way to the side entrance. There was a parking lot there, which is where people would get picked up by their parents. I got to the doors and went outside into the parking lot. There, I saw a minivan, but it wasn't my mother's van. It was a different model and color. I figured it was somebody else's parent, and my mother wasn't there yet. The time was not quite 10:30, but I think it was like 10:28 or something. I don't remember exactly. I stood there, looking around, waiting for my mother to get there. And then I saw the minivan that was sitting there with the engine running, and the front passenger's window started to roll down. I looked and saw a woman turn her head over and look at me. We made eye contact, and I could tell that she was going to say something. Then she did. The woman said that she was there to pick me up, and my mother had asked her to. She then said that she was a friend of my mother. I had never seen this woman before in my life, though. I may not have been the brightest kid in the world, but I sure wasn't that stupid. I was extremely skeptical. I asked the woman how she knew my mother exactly, and the woman replied saying something like, "We're just old friends." I then told the woman that I didn't feel comfortable going with her, and I was going to wait for my mother. The woman tried to get me to just go in the van. I then turned around to head back into the school. This situation was starting to feel really sketchy. The problem was, when I got back to the side doors of the school, they wouldn't open. The doors were locked. I had forgotten that all doors to the school were locked during the school day besides the front main entrance. Then, things got worse. I looked back to the van to see a side sliding door start to open up. I wasn't aware that anybody else had been inside of it. A man emerged and started walking towards me. The van was maybe 50 feet away at this point, as I stood right outside of the side doors to the school. I felt like my only option was to run away. I turned and ran around to the front side of the school. I didn't bother to look back at all to see if I would be chased. Back then, I could run pretty fast, and luckily, I made it around to the front end of the school pretty quickly. I kept running until I got to the front doors, and then I walked inside. When you first got inside the front doors at the school, there was a little window where a woman sat during the school day. She would ask you who you were, and you had to show her your student ID or whatever. She asked me for my ID, and as I got it out, I tried to tell her about what had just happened. I must not have explained it very well, though, because she seemed pretty confused, and to be honest, the whole situation was pretty confusing. I got a hall pass from my mother to leave school for an appointment that I didn't know what it was. Then, my mother wasn't there, but another woman was, and asked me to go with her. Then a grown man popped out of the side of the van. Believe me, I was just as confused as she was. After confirming my school ID, the woman at the window wrote me a pass to go back to my history class, and I was on my way. I walked through the empty hallways of the school, back to class. This was just about 15 minutes after I had originally left. When I walked back in, my teacher was speaking, and there was a video that was paused on the board. I remember it was super awkward walking into the middle of class. Everybody was staring at me. They, as well as the teacher, were probably all really confused seeing me return soon after I had left. "Back so soon?" Mr. Watterson said. I just said, "Yeah, there was confusion and I didn't have to leave." I then sat back down at my desk and the lesson continued. Class only went on for about another 10 minutes after that, and then we were let out. My next period was English. This class was always pretty boring to me for some reason, but it was also fairly easy. I had Miss Gallo as my teacher, who was very nice. I got to class, and the day started like any other. But during this class, probably 20 minutes in, Miss Gallo got a phone call at her desk. She paused the lesson and answered it. When she hung up the phone, she told us that we were going into a lockdown, and she made it clear that this was not a drill. She seemed fairly concerned, and we all had to leave our desks and sit on the ground in the back of the classroom. We had no idea what it was about, and I truly had no clue either. I wasn't able to connect the dots for some reason. The lockdown went on for a good 30 minutes. Everybody was really quiet, and most people didn't say anything. Eventually, there was another phone call. Miss Gallo went over and answered it, and returned to inform us that the lockdown had been lifted. We were all relieved, and we finished up class, which didn't last too much longer. There was still another hour of school left at that point. By the time the school day was over, though, the word had spread, and I had found out what the lockdown was for. A man had walked into the school and completely surpassed the woman at the window asking for credentials. She asked him to stop, but he just blew past her without saying a word and walked into the school. He then disappeared into the hallways, and she had to call the office, who made the decision to lock down the school until the individual was found and identified. Unfortunately, he hid. It took about 30 minutes to find him, and the police had to be called. They found him hiding in the bathrooms that were right by my locker. And the craziest part was that it was the same man who had come out of the minivan that had tried to pick me up. This story remains one of the craziest things to ever happen to me. The woman and the man must have somehow created the note for me and tried to get me to leave the school. Who they were and how they found me, I truly have no idea. It really freaks me out to think about that part. Luckily, nothing like that happened again.